Hello everyone, welcome to the video. Now in today's video I'm going to be taking a look at something slightly different. What I'm going to be looking at is the possibility of a Swedish aviation tech tree in War Thunder. Now what I'm going to be looking at in today's video specifically is more some of the possible fighter aircraft that could appear in the tree. In this video I'm just going to be looking at one fighter aircraft per tier, and they're going to be Swedish built aircraft, not sort of Lend-Lease or foreign aircraft. They're going to be Swedish aircraft that could be on the tree. I would like to thank Airfighter Stalin's son for this video idea. Really, he's been pushing quite a bit for this video, and finally I've been able to get it around to sort of finishing it off and getting it out. But anyway, so the fighters in this video, I'm going to start off with a sort of reserve tier 1 aircraft, then I'm going to go tier 2, 3, 4, and for tier 5 I'm going to have an early tier 5 and a late tier 5. So now that's all out of the way, let's get straight in and look at our first reserve aircraft. Now to start off, we're going to obviously look at my pick for a reserve level fighter aircraft, and my pick is the Svenska Aero Jacked Falcon, which is a rather interesting aircraft. As you can see in the picture, it's a biplane. The one in the picture is a Norwegian one, the Jacked Falcon 2, but what we're going to be talking mostly about are the Swedish ones. Now, not many of these aircraft were built, only 19 were constructed, but they were used by the Swedish Air Force, the Finnish Air Force, and the Norwegian Air Force. Now, it was actually built in Sweden, so it is a Swedish aircraft. So we'll look at the stats first, and it is comparable to a lot of other reserve aircraft. First off, you've got a maximum speed of 310 kilometers per hour, or 193 miles an hour, so not far off there, and a service ceiling of 7,800 meters, or 25,000 feet. So it's not actually that far off many other reserve aircraft in terms of those sort of performance stats. Machine guns, you have two machine guns. You've got two 7.92mm machine guns, which are effectively the same as most of the P shooters, a lot of the British biplanes. French aircraft I think might have 4, but it is similar to a lot of other reserve aircraft. Also the Heinkel 51 as well, very similar to that. Now, you've got takeoff weight and stuff. Not huge. It is obviously a one-person crew. It's a single-seat fighter biplane. The empty weight is 946 kilograms, and max takeoff is 1,470 kilograms. So it's quite interesting. Now, the Swedish Air Force designations for this aircraft, they called the aircraft the J6 in Swedish service. There was just the standard J6, which was basically just the normal aircraft fitted with a Bristol Jupiter 6 engine. Then there was the J6A, which had a slightly modified fuselage and a Jupiter 7F engine, so a bit more power there. And then there was the J6B, which was effectively just built by a different company and had a modified stabilizer and windshield. So I was thinking you can have those three aircraft on the reserve level sort of lineup. You can have the J6, J6A, J6B. One of them has a different sort of tailplane area and windshield. One of them has a different engine, and then you have the base version. Of course, they all have the twin 7.92mm machine guns. So I do think this would be a good pick as a base level aircraft. It's a biplane, fairly maneuverable by the looks of it, and it looks like quite a nice little aircraft. So I think that would be a good pick for a reserve level aircraft. But now that we looked at that, let's move on to our next topic, which will be a tier 2 fighter aircraft. So now my pick for a tier 2 fighter aircraft is the Volti P66 Vanguard. Now this aircraft was not actually used by the Swedish Air Force, but it was ordered. Unfortunately during the war the production was fairly limited, so the aircraft that were built that would have sort of originally been delivered to the Swedish Air Force were split between the Royal Air Force and the Chinese Nationalist Air Force. So they weren't actually used by Sweden, but they were ordered, and I had to pick a tier 2 aircraft that I thought sort of fit the tier 2 boundaries the best, so I picked this aircraft. Now in terms of armament, you've got 4 30-inch 7.62mm machine guns and 2 50 cals, so pretty decent armament there, very similar to the P40C. Maximum speed is 547 kilometers per hour, or 340 kilometers an hour, at 15,000 feet, and its service ceiling goes all the way up to 28,000 feet, or 8,600 meters. So it's a fairly decent aircraft. It is quite heavy though, but it is an all-metal fighter. First flew in 1939 and was actually retired from the US Air Force in 1943, so not a huge service length there, and only 146 were actually built. But I do think it's a decent pick for for sort of Tier 2 in the Swedish tech tree. Of course, in an eventual tech tree being added, there would be more than only one aircraft on the as a fighter in Tier 2, so more than just this would be added. But I thought this looked like a nice aircraft and would be a decent pick. Plus, it is already in the game files, so, you know, might as well add it to the Swedish tree if it was to be added. Well, now that we looked at that, let's move over to my Tier 3 pick for a fighter, which is actually a Swedish-built aircraft this time. So for my choice for a Tier 3 fighter aircraft, I looked at a Swedish-built aircraft, the FFVS Jay29. Now, there are actually two aircraft variants that Gaijin could go with when considering to add this to a Swedish tech tree. Now, there is the A variant and the B variant. Now, the main difference is the armament. The A variant has actually got two 7.87mm machine guns and two 13.2mm cannons, rather than the B variant, which just has four 13.2mm cannons. So obviously the B variant's going to have a bit more firepower, having 4 cannons rather than 2 cannons and 2 machine guns. But, you know, it's up to debate, really. The armament possibly isn't great for a Tier 3 aircraft, but the performance isn't that bad either. The maximum speed is 590 kilometers an hour, or 367 miles per hour. There is a whole variant of things here. The service ceiling is 9,300 meters, or 30,000 feet, effectively. Rate of climb is 14 meters per second, which isn't bad whatsoever there. Pretty decent aircraft, and it usually cruises at around 500 kilometers per hour, so pretty decent speed there. Looking through this, though, it had a long service life for this aircraft. It was originally introduced in September of or it first flew, I must say, in 1942. It was introduced in 1943 and only went out of service in 1952. So it did have quite a long service life, and 198 of them were built. So it is quite a long-ranging lifespan for this aircraft, to be honest. Now, one thing I did sort of think when I first saw this is it looks a bit like a Focke-Wulf 190 with the gear of a Wildcat. Now, it turns out the gear doesn't actually fold up like the Wildcat. It folds backwards into the underside of the fuselage. So, quite interesting there. But I think this aircraft may be a tiny bit slow. Probably this would be placed in the sort of lower rated end of Tier 3. There would obviously be other aircraft on the tech tree. This is just one of the fighters that I picked out that I think could be interesting to see added to the game. It is a single seat fighter though, but definitely something interesting to see added, and I think this could make a very nice addition to the Swedish tech tree. So now that we spoke about that, let's move on to my choice for a Tier 4 fighter aircraft. Now, my pick for a Tier 4 fighter aircraft is the Saab 21. Now, this aircraft had its first flight in 1943, and it was introduced on the 1st of December in 1945, so not quite used in World War II. It was retired, though, in 1954, so yet again another Swedish aircraft with a very long lifespan, and 298 of these were built, so it is quite a popular aircraft. Now, in terms of armament, there's a few variants that Gaijin could choose to implement. As with the previous aircraft, there is the A1, the A2, and the A3. The A2 and the A3 have the same armament, from what I can tell. Now, the A1 has got a single 20mm cannon with 60 rounds, and then it also has two 13.2mm guns and another two 13.2mm guns. One set of them is in the nose, one set of them is in the wings. The ones in the nose have 350 rounds per gun, and the ones in the wings have 325 rounds per gun. Now, the A2 and the A3 variants have pretty much the same armament, but the A2 and the A3 can carry extra loadouts, from what I can tell. Now, on the inner wing mounts, they can carry basically a lot of small rockets and bombs, only like 450 kilogram bombs, those sort of things. Outer wing mounts, they can carry some, basically just rockets, really. Small rockets, really, not that great. But under the belly, it can carry up to 600 kilogram of bombs. And on the wingtips, it can carry some drop tanks. Now, and they could be armed in flight as bombs as well. So that's kind of interesting. The drop tanks can be armed as bombs. So, you know, Gaijin could add that. I don't see why I don't see any reason why they wouldn't. but we don't have drop tank mechanics yet, so we'll have to wait and see with that. In terms of general flight performance, though, this thing's max speed is 650 kilometers per hour, or 403 miles an hour in the fighter configuration, but then in the attacker configuration, it is 560 kilometers per hour, or 347. So a lot slower in the attacker configuration. Of course, that would be minused off as you put payloads on in the modifications tab. Rate of climb of 15 meters per second, not bad whatsoever. Service ceiling of 11,000 meters or 36,000 feet, pretty decent there for a tier 4 aircraft. Good range, it can go 750 kilometers, so not too bad. And it is powered by a single Daimler-Benz DB605 engine, which, as you may know, is a German engine, which I believe is featured on the BF109. So, pretty decent there, and you know, not many of these aircraft survive, but there are surviving aircraft, so Gaijin obviously could go and use them as references. And it is worth noting, a user-made model of this aircraft, I don't know if it still is usable, but was usable in-game, so Gaijin could use that if they decided to implement the Swedish tech tree. Now, we do need some aircraft for Tier 5, of course, and to start off the Tier 5s, I'm going to be taking a look at a starter-level jet, this being the Saab 21R. Now, this is effectively the same as the vehicle we've just looked at, the Saab 21 with the piston engine. The only change is that this has got a gas turbine in the back, more specifically a Goblin jet engine. Now, there's two variants that could be added. There is the 21RA or the 21RB. Now, the RB is quicker, and I would suppose they would add that variant, because the RA can only go 800 kilometers per hour, or 497 miles an hour. So for a starter jet, you want something a bit quicker. So the preferred variant for them to go with is the RB, which could go 930 kilometers per hour, or 578 miles an hour. So obviously quite a bit quicker there. Service ceiling of about 12,000 meters or 39,000 feet, and the takeoff roll is 2,133 feet or 650 meters. Now, the armament is slightly changed from the piston-driven variant. The RA had the exact same armament, but the RB is the variant we're going to be looking at. And that has got the same single 20mm cannon in the nose, but this time it has 120 rounds of ammunition rather than 60. And then in the nose it also has some twin 12.7mm guns, which have 250 rounds per gun. And then in the wing root it's got another two 12.7mm guns with 325 rounds per gun. So same amounts of armament, same amount of rounds per gun, but they are a slightly lower caliber for the sort of secondary guns in a way. Now, you can have some separate loadouts. You can have, on the belly, you can have 10 8cm Panzergrat M46 AP rockets, or you can have 10 15cm Sprengrecht M46 HE rockets. Just a variety of rockets, really. You can have lots of rockets, and then you can have the drop tanks on the end of the wings, which, as with the standard Saab 21, can be armed in flight as incendiary bombs to attack ground targets. So that would be very interesting if they added those drop tanks that could also be used as bombs. That would be quite interesting. Or on the belly you could have the towed gun pod, which contained 8 8mm machine guns with 800 rounds per gun. That would be an interesting armament, just adding a lot of, they're not powerful individual guns, but you add a lot more of them with quite a lot of rounds per gun. That would definitely be a rather interesting thing to do. So that is my pick for a starter jet, the Saab 21RB. Now let's go and look at my idea of what could be a good top tier jet for the Swedish Air Force. Now my pick for a top tier jet for the Swedish tech tree is the Saab Jay29 Tunnan. Now this aircraft was very much a mass-produced jet fighter. Over 600 of them were actually built, and the performance isn't too bad. Now, I would say that I would put this at 9.0. It's not quite got the performance of aircraft like the Hunter and the MiG-17, but it is still fairly decent performance. The maximum speed is 1,060 kilometers per hour, or 660 miles per hour. The service ceiling is 15,000 meters, or 50,000 feet, and the rate of climb is 32.1 meters per second, or 6,300 feet per minute. So it's not really bad in terms of performance. You could possibly get away with doing doing a G91 with this and putting it at 8.0, where at 8.0 it would perform very well. Another thing to mention is that there is actually a user-made model that Gaijin could use to implement this into the game, and that would save them a lot of time, I suppose, and would sort of increase the chances of this being added into the game. In terms of gun armament, it's got some 420mm Spano Mark V cannons, so not too bad in that case. It can carry air-to-air missiles, so if Gaijin were considering adding those in the near future, they could add them to this aircraft. It can carry the Sidewinder, the RB-24, and can also carry 145mm anti-armor rockets. So very big rockets there with a lot of explosive in the front there. So it's got a pretty decent performance, good payload really, and it's a very it was a very innovative jet at its time. It broke a lot of records when it was initially built. Not to mention that it was in service for a very long time. First flew in 1948 and was only retired in 1976, although it was only used by the Swedish and the Austrian air forces, so not exactly a hugely popular aircraft in terms of the amount of people using it, but a lot of people did use, a lot of them were built for those air forces. And just to round it off, it was called the Flying Barrel. Looking at pictures, you can probably see why. In terms of moving on in a tech tree from this aircraft, the only possibility would possibly be the Saab 32 Lansen. The only reason I didn't really put that as my top tier jet is because the top speed is incredibly close to the speed of sound, so I didn't want to go too fast, because as of now, at least when this video is being made, we don't know what Gaijin are going to do in regards to supersonic jets and tier 6 aviation. So if they do decide to go supersonic jets, the Saab 32 would definitely be a good stopgap in between the J29 and whatever supersonic jet comes after that. But anyway, so that was my fighter picks really for a Swedish tech tree in War Thunder. I tried to pick aircraft that were mostly Swedish built, of course with tier 2 going with the Vanguard. Despite not being used by the Swedish Air Force, it is a quite nice looking aircraft, and I just figured that would be something that would round off tier 2 quite nicely. Of course there will be other aircraft other than the ones I've picked as fighters in an eventual tech tree. If you want more information, go on the War Thunder forums. There's plenty of stuff talking about the possibilities of a Swedish tech tree. So yeah, but anyway, thanks a lot to Airfighter Stalin's son again for suggesting this video idea. Thank you very much for that. Thanks to anyone who has watched this video all the way through. It is very much appreciated. If you could leave a like, I would appreciate that very much. Please even consider subscribing to the channel if you did enjoy. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.